Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Welcome back to another class in reading this great book of Islam, the Shifa of Qadi Iyad. Pick up where we left off. We're now in section 15, the benefit of the sections investigating the Prophet's protection from wrong actions. This is for those who have the book, page 339. قال المصنف رحمه الله ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين آمين. So Qadi Iyad, he says, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him and may we benefit from his knowledge in this world and in the next. The truth should by now be clear to you that the Prophet ﷺ was protected from being ignorant of Allah and his attributes in any way. Logically and by consensus, the Prophet ﷺ was protected before prophethood from being in any state at all which was incompatible with knowledge, and he was protected after it according to oral reports and transmission. It is absolutely impossible, both logically and by the Sharia itself, that the Prophet ﷺ should have been ignorant of anything concerning the Sharia and he confirmed or concerning the revelation he conveyed from his Lord. The Prophet ﷺ was also protected from telling lies and making contradictory statements, either intentionally or unintentionally, from the time Allah Ta'ala made him a prophet and sent him as a messenger. Such things are impossible for him according to the Sharia, by consensus, by examination, and by proof. He was also absolutely free from those things before he was a prophet. So he's just basically summarizing the last several sections that we took. And then he says, he was free of major wrong actions by consensus, and from minor ones, as we have made clear, and from lasting oversight and inattention, and from continuing in error and forgetfulness regarding what he practiced in the Sharia, what he prescribed in the Sharia for the community. He was protected in all states, pleasure and anger, gravity and jest. Okay, so this is a nice summary of all of the things that we believe about the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and the protection from any sorts of deficiencies. You must hold on to this fact like a miser guards his gold, and value these sections, meaning the sections that we've just taken. Now, mind you, this is section 15 of this chapter, this is chapter 1 of this third part of the book. Okay, so he's basically summarizing the last 14 chapters. So he's saying, hold on to these teachings. The one who is ignorant of what is necessary for the Prophet ﷺ, or what is impossible for him, and who does not know the rules governing these matters, is not safe from believing some things to be different from the way they really are. So he might ascribe things to the Prophet ﷺ that must not be ascribed to him. Thus he could be destroyed by his ignorance and fall into the chasm of the lowest level of the fire. May Allah Ta'ala protect us. His false opinion and his believing, which is not permitted for him to believe, having brought him to the abode of ruin. That is why the Prophet ﷺ protected the two men who saw him at night in the mosque with Safiya, his wife, by saying, it is Safiya. Then he added, Shaitan runs through the son of Adam as blood flows through him, and I feared that something might be cast into your hearts which could cause you to be destroyed. So the story is that the Prophet ﷺ was with his wife Safiya at night. At night, meaning you couldn't really tell who that other person is. So the Prophet ﷺ happened upon these two companions in the mosque. So he went out of his way ﷺ, to point out that this was his wife that was next to him. So the companions would be like, well, I mean, we would never accuse you of anything else. To which the Prophet ﷺ said, but Shaitan runs through our blood, runs through us the way the blood runs through us, meaning that I don't want there to be any doubt that I am with my wife. So this last paragraph that we just read, one of the things that he talks about is he says it's important for us to know what is obligatory for us to believe about the Prophet ﷺ, and what is impossible for the Prophet ﷺ. So these are what we call rational rulings that we use when we teach theology, that there are things that are obligatory to believe, And then there are things that are impossible to believe, and the rest of the things are things that are possible. So all of the things that he's just mentioned, these are impossible things. It's impossible that the Prophet ﷺ forgot to convey some of the message. It's impossible that the Prophet ﷺ did not know all of the things that he needed to know in order to deliver the message, so on and so forth. Why do we talk about it, matters of belief in that way? Is because they help prevent us from, as he said, ascribing to the Prophet ﷺ something that's false, a false belief, a false assumption. Because those false assumptions in these matters of belief have disastrous consequences in this world and in the hereafter. Okay, returning to the text. This is one of the benefits of what we have discussed in these sections. Because of his ignorance, it may be that an ignorant man might not know what the matter really is. When he hears something doubtful, he might think that discussing it is one of the means to gain knowledge, when it would be far better to be silent. It should be clear to you that this is connected to the benefit which we have just mentioned. The second benefit concerns what is necessary for the foundation of fiqh and what minor questions of fiqh are also based on. By it, one is freed from most of the controversies arising from the disagreement of the fuqaha concerning a number of questions. It concerns judgments based on what the Prophet ﷺ said and did, and what is a vast subject and one of the major sources of fiqh. Such judgments have as their fundamental premise the fact that the Prophet ﷺ was truthful in his reports and what he conveyed. Oversight is not possible in respect of what he said, and the Prophet ﷺ was protected from deliberate opposition to Allah in all of his actions. As scholars disagree about the occurrence of minor wrong actions, so they also disagree about copying his actions. This matter is fully dealt with in the books on the science of the fundamental principles of fiqh, which is also known as usul al-fiqh, so we will not go into it in depth. The third benefit is for the judge and the mufti concerning what is necessary for them to know in respect of anyone who ascribes any of these things to the Prophet ﷺ and describes the Prophet ﷺ as having them. If someone did not recognize what is permitted and what is forbidden for the Prophet ﷺ, and what there is consensus or dispute about, how can he decide on a fatwa regarding such matters? Without this knowledge, how can he know whether what a person says is imperfect or praiseworthy? He is either in danger of unjustly shedding the blood of a Muslim, which is haram, or of overlooking the Prophet's right and thus violating respect of the Prophet ﷺ. In the same way, the masters of legal methodology, usul al-fiqh, the imams of the ulama and the precise scholars have disagreed about whether the angels are protected from wrong actions, and it is this matter which we will address in the following section. Okay, so in this section that we just read, he's basically giving, one thing he's giving us a summary of all of the previous sections so far in this chapter, and then telling us what the benefits are. The benefits are that, well, we know what the Prophet ﷺ can and can't do. And then also a benefit is more specifically when it comes to matters of law, of fiqh, the jurist understands also what is doable and what is not doable, because it's upon those things we will follow, we will imitate the actions of the Prophet ﷺ or not. And then lastly, of course, for a judge or a mufti needs to know these things. So if somebody comes to him and expresses these views, he has to be able to help guide that person if what they're saying is right or what they're saying is wrong. Okay, next is section 16. As he said, this will conclude chapter 1, the next section, on the protection of angels from wrong action. So we believe that the angels are infallible, that the angels do not commit wrong actions, because they are under the direct orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لا يعصون الله ما أمرهم ويفعلون ما يؤمرون. Allah Ta'ala says they do not disobey Allah Ta'ala, and they only carry out what Allah Ta'ala has commanded of them. The Muslims agree that the judgment concerning the messengers amongst the angels is the same as that for the prophets ﷺ, and that they are protected from the same things that the prophets are protected from. The angels are like the prophets with their communities in respect of the duties they have with regard to conveying revelation to the prophets. The ulama disagree about angels other than the messengers amongst them. So amongst the angels, there's a small group of angels that are messengers that bring the revelation to the different prophets, like Gabriel. So he's saying that subset of angels, there's no disagreement about them. The ulama disagree about angels other than the messengers amongst them. One group believes that all of them are protected from acts of rebellion, and they use as proof Allah's words, the verse that I just mentioned previously. They do not disobey Allah in what He orders them and carry out what they order Him to do. Also, the verse, there is not one of us who does not have a known station. We are thus drawn up in ranks. We are those who glorify. Also, the verse, those in whose presence do not consider themselves too great to worship Him and do not grow tired of it, they glorify Him by night and day without ever flagging. And the verse, those who are with your Lord do not consider themselves too great to worship Him, noble, virtuous. And then lastly, the verse, no one may touch it except the purified, and similar reports. Another group believe that these are special qualities restricted to the angels who are messengers and those amongst them who are brought near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They take as proof things which the people of reports and commentaries mention, which we will mention later, clarifying their position, inshallah. The correct position is that all of them are protected, and their high rank is free from anything that might lower their rank and station from the sublimity of their high degree. One of our sheikhs indicated that there is no need for any faqih to involve himself in discussing their protection. I say that any discussion concerning this matter must be based on what we have said regarding the protection of the prophets in respect of the benefits which we have mentioned, except for the benefit of words and stations which must be omitted in this instance. Okay, so what we believe is that all of the angels are protected from any wrong actions. Something that those who do not consider it necessary for all angels to be protected use as a proof is what is said in the tradition and commentaries regarding the story of Harut and Marut, and what Imam Ali alayhi salam and Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu related about them and their temptations. You should know that these reports do not relate anything, either weak or sound, from the Messenger of Allah himself alayhi salatu wasalam, and there is nothing which is taken by analogy. Oops, my book fell, sorry. Nothing taken by analogy. The commentators disagree about the meaning of what the Quran says about them, right? So this is the story of Harut and Marut at the time of Sulaiman alayhi salam. The verse about them is in Surah Al-Baqarah, and the reason he's including this whole discussion here is because some people falsely claim that, oh, those are angels that taught people bad things, wrong things, and then some people then use that as proof to say, well, the angels are not protected. So it's a logical inclusion, sort of as a concluding section of this chapter. What one of them stated was rejected by many of the Salaf, as we will show. These reports are taken from the books of the Jews and from their fabrications, what we call al-Isra'iliyat. There are stories that come from either Jewish sources and in very minor instances from other religions about things that are mentioned in the Quran, and we can take those things as long as they don't violate any of our principles, and this is one of the cases in which it violates one of our principles. These reports are taken from the books of the Jews and from their fabrications. What Allah Ta'ala told us about at the beginning of the passage concerned their forging lies like that against Sulaiman alayhi salam, and they're declaring him to be an unbeliever. We talked about those traditions earlier. The story contains an immense atrocity. We will deal with that by removing the cover from these ambiguities, inshallah. Scholars disagree about whether Harut and Marut were angels or men, and whether they are meant to as two angels. Is the recitation truly two angels, Malakaini, or is it two kings, Malikaini? Malikaini. So they're very similar in recitation. Are Allah Ta'ala's words what was sent down, or are they it was not sent down? Man unzila. is, quote, they do not teach anyone, negative or affirmative. Most of the commentators believe that Allah Ta'ala tested people by the two angels who instructed them in magic, making it clear that the use of magic amounts to disbelief. Whoever learns it disbelieves, and whoever leaves it believes. Allah Ta'ala quotes them as saying, quote, we are merely a trial and temptation. إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ فِتْنَةٌ. So do not disbelieve, فَلَا تَكْفُرْ. That's part of the verse. Do not disbelieve. They taught magic to people with a warning. That is, they told them who came to learn it, do not do it. If it parts a man and his wife, do not suppose that it is good. It is magic, so do not disbelieve. According to this interpretation, what the two angels did was an act of obedience, and they acted as Allah Ta'ala had commanded them. It was not rebellion, it was a trial for others. So in this interpretation, that Allah Ta'ala commanded them to teach people black magic, and to teach them black magic so that they would not do it. Ibn Wahab has related that Khalid ibn Abi Imran mentioned Harut and Marut as teaching magic. Ibn Wahab added, we absolved them of this. One of the scholars recited the verse as meaning, quote, it was not sent down on the two angels. Ma unzila, to negate that it was that they taught. So this is another interpretation that will lead us to the same conclusion. Khalid took this position, and he possessed both esteem and knowledge. He absolved them even from teaching the magic, which other scholars said that they had permission to teach, provided that they made it clear that it was disbelief and a test and a trial from Allah. How is it possible to do anything other than absolve them from all major wrong actions and acts of rebellion and the disbelief mentioned in these traditions? Khalid, as well as Ibn Abbas, said that this verse is a negative statement. Makki said that the implication of the word Sulaiman did not disbelieve means that he did not disbelieve by believing the magic which the shaitans fabricated against him and which the Jews followed, and he said that the two angels were Jibreel and Mikael. The Jews alleged that the two angels did that, just as they also claimed that Sulaiman used magic. Allah Ta'ala called them liars, and he says, quote, but the shaitans disbelieved and taught people magic, and what had been sent down on the two angels / kings of Babylon, Harut and Marut. It is said that they were two men who disbelieved. As-Sakkan, so there's another interpretation that Harut and Marut were not angels, but they were from humans. As-Sakkan said that Harut and Marut were two infidels from the people of Babel. He must have recited what was sent down on the two kings by this interpretation. Abdurrahman ibn Abza said that the two kings were Dawood and Sulaiman. As-Samarqandi said that they were two kings from the tribes of Israel, whom Allah Ta'ala transformed. The recitation is Malikaini, two kings, however, is rare, meaning that that recitation of the verse, that there are two kings, that's a rare recitation. Meaning that it's not permissible to recite in that way. One second. Yeah, when she says rare, meaning that it is shadh, it is a non-canonical recitation. It is not rare. That's not the right. That is a translation. As we said before, a shadh recitation is a recitation that we cannot recite the Quran in that, but the shadh recitation, the non-canonical recitation of the Quran, we cannot use it in prayer, but we can use it as a tafsir. And that's why he's including it here. Okay, returning to the text. The interpretation of the verse according to the evaluation of Abu Muhammad al-Makki is good. It absolves the angels and removes impurity from them and considers them absolutely pure. Allah Ta'ala described them as being purified and, quote, noble, virtuous. Allah Ta'ala also says they do not disobey Allah in what He orders them and carry out what they are ordered to do. Another thing that is brought up by people is the story of Iblis being a leader of the angels and one of the guardians of the garden. However, Allah Ta'ala made him an exception amongst the angels when He said they prostrated except for Iblis. Well, Iblis wasn't an angel, right? Iblis was a jinn. And that verse, فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا Iblis, all of them prostrated except Iblis, is a rhetorical structure that shows us that all of them does not just refer to the angels, but then all of them meaning the angels and the jinn. And then Allah Ta'ala excludes Iblis from that. This is also a subject of disagreement. Most deny that Iblis, Satan, was an angel and say that he was Abul Jinn, the father of the jinn, as Adam was Abul Ins, the father of men. This is what Al-Hasan, Qatada, and Ibn Zayd said. Shahr ibn Hawshab said that he was one of the jinn whom the angels threw to earth when the jinn became corrupt, making an exception outside the general category, yani saying they all prostrated except Iblis, making an exception except Iblis from a general category being referred to is common and allowed in the Arabic language. Allah Ta'ala says they have no knowledge of it, just conjecture. Another thing related in the traditions is that some of the angels rebelled against Allah Ta'ala and were burned. They were commanded to prostrate to Adam and refused, so they were burned. Sound traditions refuse this, so it is not to be given any consideration, and Allah Ta'ala knows best. Okay, so with this, we have concluded chapter 1 with this last discussion, which is an important discussion on angels and some considerations about the jinn, because you will find different type of traditions, or not traditions, but stories out there that might be confusing. So the upshot of it is that the Prophet, like we say, the Prophet ﷺ is protected, infallible. Now we know what that means from major wrong actions, minor wrong actions. He can't forget. He can't get angry and forget the verses that he was supposed to recite. He can't not know about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those are impossible things, or else he would not be a prophet. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we've talked about this for at least over a month now, in the last 16 sections. Likewise, the angels are also infallible from the point of view of that they can only do what Allah Ta'ala asks them to do. They have no free will. And then now we know that the story of Harut and Marut, there are several ways of interpreting it. One way of interpreting it is that they were commanded by Allah Ta'ala to teach people black magic and to also teach them not to do it. Or they were not two angels, but they were two kings or disbelievers who were mischievous and taught black magic. And then lastly, about the jinn are like us, they have free will. So Iblis was from the jinn. He refused the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what happened. Now, just a word about black magic is that black magic is real, it exists, but it's also very weak. It's not something that's very strong. So there were ulama in the past that learned black magic. And I mean, at Al-Azhar, they used to tell us when we would talk about magic, they would say black magic, you can learn it, but you can't do it. In other words, there are some people who learn it, like that interpretation, in order not to do it. So you learn it, so you say, oh, okay, this is what it is, so now we're going to stay away from it. And part of learning it is the process of staying away from it. I have no knowledge of black magic, so don't ask me about it, and I don't have any interest in black magic, but there are people that know that stuff, and God forbid if somebody was afflicted with something, they would go to those people for help. Okay, because we're about to enter into a new chapter, I just wanted to pause and see if there were any questions. Okay, maybe we'll read just the first section the first or second or one or two more sections, and then we'll call it a night, inshallah. Chapter 2, the states of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in respect of this world and what non-essential human qualities he could have. Section 1. Somebody's asking about somebody who can answer questions about Islam in Spanish. That I would have to look into. So if somebody can just give me a week or two to look into that. Okay, section 1, the states of the prophets alayhi salam in relation to human conditions. We have already stated that our Prophet ﷺ and all the prophets ﷺ and messengers were men. His body and outward parts were mortal and subject to accidents, change, pains, illness, and death, to which all men are subject. None of this involves imperfection, because something can only be imperfect in comparison with something more perfect and complete of its own type. Allah Ta'ala has decreed that all the prophets of this world will live and die in it, and then come out of it. He has created all men in the domain of vicissitudes. Therefore, the Prophet ﷺ became ill, suffered complaints, and was afflicted by heat and bitter cold. He was touched by hunger and thirst, anger and displeasure. He felt fatigue and experienced weakness of old age. He fell and was scratched. The unbelievers inflicted a head injury on him, and he broke his tooth. He drank poison and was bewitched. That the Prophet was bewitched. I think that's the next section. Yeah, that's important for us to discuss. What does that mean? He treated himself and was cupped, the cupping, the hijama, and he had talismans and amulets. When his term was fulfilled, he died, and met the highest friend, and was rescued from the abode of test and affliction. Now, out of our great love and respect of the Prophet ﷺ, we are always very careful in the language that we use to describe him. So, other than teaching the way we are doing now, we would not say that the Prophet ﷺ died, because that's a very crass way of saying it. But we say when the Prophet ﷺ went to Ar-Rafiq Al-A'la. Now, some people might be like, what's the point? The point is that we are so much in love with the Prophet ﷺ and have so much respect and honor for him ﷺ, that we are very careful in how we describe even these human things. From the point of view, if somebody said, did the Prophet ﷺ die? Said yes. I mean, he was innaka mayyitun innahum mayyitun. Allah Ta'ala himself says that you will die, we will die, kullu man alayha fan, etc. But it's a harsh reference, because it might make somebody think that the Prophet ﷺ is no more. And we already learned that the prophets, all of them ﷺ, are alive in their graves. We also learned that the Prophet ﷺ receives our actions once a week and makes istighfar for us. The Prophet ﷺ returns the salams that we give to him, so on and so forth. So because of that, outside of reading a book like this or a class, we don't say, when the Prophet ﷺ died. We say when he passed to, or when he moved to Ar-Rafiq Al-A'la, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And this is something that I hope we can revive, that we are careful in how we describe the Prophet alayhi sallam. Okay, returning to the text. These are characteristics of humanness which cannot be avoided. Other prophets ﷺ suffered even greater afflictions than Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ. They were killed, thrown into the fire, and sawn in half. Allah Ta'ala made their affliction the cause of the death of some of them at certain times, and he protected others of them, as he later protected our Prophet ﷺ from the people. Even though our Lord did not protect our Prophet ﷺ from the hand of Ibn Qami'a in the battle of Uhud, nor veil him from the eyes of his enemies when the people of Ta'if cursed him, he was veiled from the eyes of Quraysh when he went to Mount Thawr, and the sword of Ghawrath, the stone of Abu Jahl, and Suraqa's horse were held back from him. Although Allah Ta'ala did not protect the Prophet ﷺ from the magic of Labib ibn al-Asam, he did protect him from the greater poison of the Jewess. which is the story that will come in the next section. Allah's prophets ﷺ were both tested and guarded in that manner. That is part of Allah Ta'ala's perfect wisdom, and it makes clear their honor in these situations, makes their affair clear, and completes His word amongst them. Their humanity is confirmed by their trial, and any possibility of confusion regarding them is removed from weak people, so they will not become misled by the miracles which appeared at the hands of as the Christians were misled about Isa, the son of Mary, alayhi as-salam. The Prophet's afflictions are actually a solace for their communities and increase their reward with their Lord and perfect them in the eyes of the one who is good to them. So he's just saying these normal human things, it doesn't take away from the completeness and wholeness and perfection of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Some scrupulous scholars say that these events and changes which are mentioned are specific to the human bodies which are mortal. They are what is endured by all the children of Adam because they are of the same species. Inwardly, the Prophets ﷺ are generally free of these afflictions, free of these human attributes, and connected to the highest assembly and the angels so that they can take from them and receive revelation from them. The Prophet ﷺ said, "My eyes sleep, but my heart does not sleep." He said, "I am not like you in my form. My Lord gives me food and drink at night." He also said, "I do not forget, but I am made to forget so that He can make a sunnah by what I do." He said that His secret, His inward and His soul are different from His body and outward form, and that none of the events which affect His outward form, weakness, hunger, sleeplessness, and sleep, affect His inward. This is not the case with other men. So this opinion, which is the opinion that we hold, is that while the Prophet ﷺ outwardly had these human qualities, inwardly he was not affected by them because of the hadith traditions that he just mentioned. When other men sleep, their bodies and hearts are overwhelmed by sleep. The Prophet was present with his heart in sleep, the same as he was when he was awake, to the extent that it is reported in tradition that he was protected from minor impurity in sleep since his heart was awake. So in some narrations, we say that the Prophet ﷺ did not lose his wudu when he slept. And there are some hadith that he slept and you could hear him sleeping and then he would wake up and he would just go pray, meaning he didn't make wudu. So when you get down to it, even still, when it comes to the human things, like he gets tired, he gets hungry, yes, outwardly he manifested that, but inwardly he was even still protected from those things, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Similarly, when other people are hungry, their bodies grow weak and listless, and they become totally useless. The Prophet ﷺ said, "I am not like you in my form. My Lord gives me food and drink at night." Similarly, I say that in all these states of fatigue, sickness, sorcery, and hunger, nothing affected his inward, nor did they overflow onto his tongue or limbs in any way that was not fitting for him, as happens to other men, a subject which we will begin to clarify later. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa maulana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Put a pin in there, inshallah.